And good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Earle Farrell for Memphis. Today we've got a real treat for you. We're checking in with the one, the only Jimmy Ogle, who's at his home in Knoxville, Tennessee. Hey, Jimmy, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm glad we went through all our technology today to get this put together.
We
Really,
we pulled it off. Jimmy, he has a smartphone, but he just uses it for what he needs to use it, and he hadn't needed it for this before.
the smartphone, not a smart user.
But well, I tell you what, you're better than a lot of people. They can't do this, so you're ahead of the game.
Well, with the help of Chelsea and Ashley down at the AT&T store, actually drove in my car because I cannot put an app on it fast.
Yeah, he was going to go to the app store, but he didn't know where it was.
Yeah, it's right in your hand.
And of course,
It's not. I'm not cyber at all. That's for sure.
well, you're fine. For those of you who don't know, Jimmy Ogle's background, he was the county historian, and he was also the duck master at the Peabody. He still does, and comes back to do walking tours of downtown. Knows
Well, wait a minute.
what?
Well, that had since March. No, since the COVID
Well,
hit.
no, I said you haven't been, but hopefully
Oh, I haven't
soon.
been there.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
you were before you moved, and then you were
Oh,
coming
yeah.
back this spring, and then the
Yeah.
corona hit, and that blew that for a lot of folks.
Well, I had a timeline. I call it a farewell tour. It went a little bit longer than I thought. Through doing things at Elmwood and things at the Pink Palace. Very fortunate to do that. And downtown Memphis Commission. And a lot of that got up on the internet this year. If you just Google Jimmy Ogle or YouTube or whatever it is, you'll see some of those lectures and things. And then the downtown Memphis Commission is actually doing walking tours, but doing them virtually with Robert Montgomery, one of the workers there, twice a month, which is getting a great audience in places as far away as Canada. So it's opened up a whole new thing there. The COVID has, so
Well,
that's cool.
there's always good that comes from every bad, and
Yeah, yeah.
Pete Evans, who works for Henry Turley, I told him I was going to try to get you on this. He said, "Be sure and say hi to you."
Okay, thank you.
And then,
How do you-
when I put up the promo about you coming on, I had a number of other people say, "Be sure to say hi to Jimmy from us. Everybody misses you here."
Well, thank you.
And
I've met quite a few folks there myself.
well, I know that you're a big part of Memphis, always will be. There was interesting thing that somebody put up this morning, which has kind of made me want to do this, was that just all the restaurants that we miss. Of course, right now we've got so many restaurants that now you can't go into, only 25% occupancy, and I'm sure the same because you're in Tennessee as well.
I think we're at 50% right now.
Oh, are you? Well, maybe.
We haven't dropped to 25. We've gone up and down some. Of course, a lot of restaurants have had to change to do the takeout and all the delivery services, and then close at 10 o'clock at night early, like some of them.
Yeah, the
had people-
curfew.
Yeah, so so it is what it is. You got to be safe. Number one.
Well, and it's a law. They're fining people and, a bunch of other stuff. So, you just got to be very careful of that. In fact, the promo picture I put up was that you and the group shot it could just squeeze Kathy into it out in front of BB King's for the day they put your blues note on Beale Street.
Oh, yeah.
So,
That's down there. Well, it's actually, we did the ceremony November 2nd of 2019. No, 2018, I guess it was. I'm not sure. 2019. At Blue City Cafe, and it takes a while. They get a bunch of them, like 6 or 7. They put them all in the concrete at one time rather than breaking up different concrete during the year. So it's put up down there by Handy Park, right in front of the W.C. Handy statue, right next to Al James and John Elkington. And on my right is the Blues Brothers and Sid Selvage.
oh man,
And,
you're
Danny
good.
Thomas got a historical marker right in front of me now, I understand. And W.C. Handy's right there, too. So I feel pretty good about that.
Well, you should. It's
Thank you.
very, very good company.
Can't sing a lick, but I can talk.
I'm in the same boat.
Yep.
But what they were doing was just saying, "Hey, we miss this restaurant, we miss this restaurant," and so, while we all try to keep the restaurants that we all love that are around today, which every day I'm talking about it, and Southern Security Federal Credit Union has been generous enough to we've been supporting all the restaurants in Memphis and going out and so we can do these programs. But I thought today would be interesting with somebody that knows the history of Memphis. I've been here a little over 40 years, And one of the things that everybody talks about is, and it does from time to time, because you miss old restaurants like the Knickerbocker, which Mortimer's was the byproduct of the Knickerbocker.
That's right. And Matt Mortimer was Vernon Bell's middle name, who was the owner. That's Sarah's dad.
Wow. Yeah, no, he was a huge supporter of the St. Jude golf tournament.
Well, he was one of the general chairmen there for a long time, and of course they played the original, which now it's FedEx St. Jude, but the original Memphis Open started in 1958, right there at Colonial Country Club, right behind the Knickerbocker, because that's where the Target and all that is now. That was the Colonial. Then it moved out to Cordova, then on the south wind. So it was right in their backyard. And that was a great time walking over to that tournament in the 60s and seeing people like Lee Trevino and Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus play as teenagers. And there was the Knickerbocker. Of course, they all gathered. And there's still, well, the Knickerbocker's now Dixie Cafe, and I think that is actually closed. But even when it was Dixie Cafe, there were still some photos in that building from the old tournament. And now many of those photos went over to the Mortimers, but they still carried on some of that tradition. It's Dixie Cafe.
Well, it's really it's a tribute to a lot of people that we remember all these places because they were great. They're part of Memphis, so they're really institutions. And I know that one of the great ones, Anderton's down on Madison Avenue. I love that place. Pappy and Jimmy's, Silky and Sullivan's when it was down on Beale Street. I mean Madison before it moved to Beale Street. It
was Silky's out there at Overton Square.
Yeah.
And of course, the Pappy and Jimmy's with the big lobsters on the sign, the hands and heads and everything was there at Poplar and Hollywood is where that was. And that sign later moved out to Summer Avenue past I-40, and then it's closed.
Well, somebody told me just the other day they've moved it to either someplace in Tipton County, and that's where that sign is, and they've opened up as Pappy and Jimmy's again.
Well, I'm going to find that out for you because I know some folks in Tipton County.
It's when you think about them all. I mean, there's a place that Kathy's grandfather used to talk about because all of Kathy's mother and her sisters and brother all wanted to hang out there. It was this Jungle Drive-In. I don't know if that's the name of it, but it was over on East Parkway and Airways in that area. And you drive in, and there was these little coves that they'd have the little order, box where you push the button and order what you want. But I remember Kathy's grandfather said, "No, I didn't let those girls go to that place because." And there was another one, the Luau over on Poplar Avenue.
Yeah, and it had a big tiki head in front, about 20 feet tall, right across from East High School.
Yep. And Justine's, which is another incredible restaurant.
Yeah.
I do remember the one time. I didn't go there many times, but I had a date with somebody I was trying to impress, and we went to Justine's and. The waiter came up, and I remember we had a table for two by the stairs, it wasn't one of the primary locations in the restaurant. And it was always candlelight in there, too. They didn't have any light bulbs, as I recall. They had candles on every table and some wall candles. So it was very much like it was back in the 1800s. And
and Billy Ogle has bought that house and has tried to save it out there. It's
Billy,
about a police substation going to Elmwood.
Billy Ogle
Billy apparently had a little history there of, I think where he proposed to his wife or something there.
Well,
hey, you mentioned Anderton's, and you remember that bar that was in Anderton's?
Yes, yeah.
It is over at the Cove over there on Broad. They relocated that bar. A great-looking bar that's a boat, in front of a boat. It's really cool.
I've heard that. I just have not been there.
Go to the Cove. Go to the Cove.
I just know that when we used to go there, Ron Childers and Ed Graney, and I would go down there every once in a while because Ed was always like he was out of a Perry Mason movie anyway. I mean, he was just that kind of a character. And we would go down there and have martinis, and it felt like you were in a scene out of Perry Mason, just the look of the place.
Yeah, it's great. And just up and down Madison Avenue, there's you had a whole, not just in Overton Square area, but all the way down to the Cleveland Crosstown area. There's plenty of restaurants. Milo's Tavern, when I was in college, was a Greek restaurant. Is where Elbow is now. It's where actually is where P&H was when I was in college. Then Milo's came in. P&H moved on down to Madison, and I understand P&H might be looking for a new location right now too.
Well,
P&H Cafe.
They're doing. You haven't been here since last winter.
Yeah.
They have built so many apartment buildings in Midtown and of course, downtown.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
but a 5-story apartment building that was right there where Neil's used to be at the corner of
Yeah.
Madison
Madison
and
McLean.
McLean, right across the street from is that the Linfield? Is that the name of that apartment building at the corner on the south east corner?
Gilmore.
The Gilmore.
Gilmore.
Yeah.
And that's got phinos in it.
It
I think.
it does. In fact, the guy that has Iris went in there. And and they reopened that deli. He said there's a real need for an authentic Italian deli, and so they reopened it, and everybody's thrilled that they did. And then you go further down Madison. Well, right across the street from the first place I lived in Midtown at these apartments, right across from what then was George's Bar and Grill, and now is the barbecue shop. Frank Vernon and his son Eric run that, and they had the best ribs in the country, according to a number of tabulations. And
and that's another one of those places that started somewhere else and relocated there.
Exactly.
That started over on South Parkway, way down about a Ford Funeral Home. It's Brady and Little's, as I understand.
Exactly right, because Frank started working for them, cooking in a 55-gallon drum that had been cut in half. That's the truth. It's an old oil drum, and he told me that whole story, and then he was the one that invented the barbecue spaghetti. In fact, I had Jerry Coletta from Coletta's on here just a few days ago, and I asked him about that because he's responsible for the barbecue pizza. That nobody had ever eaten a pizza when he introduced pizza to Memphis. You did if you went to Chicago or New York, but there wasn't anything here in Memphis. And so he said, well, how are we going to get them to try this? So somebody said, let's put barbecue on it. And of course.
Hey, who takes credit for barbecue nachos at the ballparks now?
Would that be the Rendezvous?
Okay.
I think it was. I think that's who put that in there.
Because, barbecue on anything in Memphis.
Yeah, in fact, they did it at the FedEx Forum as well. And you
mentioned Coletta's name. That's the times when I would want to reward myself, say I did something good, I'm going to take myself out. I'd go down to the Coletta's on South Parkway.
Yeah.
Just for the atmosphere, for the great food, the little twinkle lights in the patio, the fake patio. You're outside, they have those twinkle lights in the ceiling, great music, great food. Just the atmosphere, the Elvis Room. Old Coletta's on South Parkway is amazing.
It is. In fact, he gave us a tour via Skype and showed us what they call it, the blue room, because they had a blue sky, and you could see they put little twinkle stars all in the ceiling, and so you felt like you're outside. I wanted to sit on the patio one
time. That's what they consider the patio too, but it's indoors. That's a fake.
Well, it's the indoor patio.
That's right.
But we got a tremendous response out of that. So many people hadn't been there in years, and that's the whole reason I wanted to do this.
Did you go into the old bar and see the old leather bar, padded red and black leather that's still there from like the night before too? I mean, you talk about walking into the Godfather movie or something. That's the place.
Well, amazing. The thing is, they could sit at tables in there, but they can't sit at the bar because that's verboten all the things now.
Well, back in the 80s, we would go there for lunch. It'd be a $4.44 special. You get a little small pizzas and a drink for $4.44 at that time.
You can't beat that. Wow. How can you beat that? And it still isn't expensive.
No, it's probably $9.99 now or something, but it's still a deal.
Then if you angle over to Lamara and Airways, you had one of the greatest restaurateurs and restaurants in Memphis history, John Grazzani's original Italian restaurant.
And whatever you call a wine person, was it?
Sommelier.
Okay, I knew you would know, but he really promoted wines and the wine business and the collection of bottles and all the various years and vintages. I guess I'm not a wine guy, you can tell.
Well, but he was
had a reputation worldwide for that.
He was really, I think, responsible for the love of wine in Memphis. I mean, up until that time, Matus and the Blue Nun and Rhine wine were the most, and Boone's Farm apple wine, and of course, Heine wine from FM 100. That was popular.
Wine, yeah. I got some honey wine cans that George Brogdon bought me one time.
Did
they have wine down in Texas? Down there in
Eventually we got it.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It was that and electric light bulbs came along not long. By the way, today is Texas Independence Day, when Texas joined the Union, which was December 29th, 1845. And, of course, our independence from Mexico came on March the 2nd, 1836. And but we retain the right to go back as an independent nation if we don't like it.
Yeah.
And so,
well, you got your own power grid and everything, I understand, and all that.
we got oceans, we got mountains, and we're relatively out there. So they've always got that.
Sam Houston got kicked out of Tennessee to become your president and governor down there.
Everybody got kicked out of Tennessee.
David Crockett got tired of Andrew Jackson and said, "To hell with Tennessee, I'm going to Texas." And then a year later, got killed at the Alamo, so it didn't do him really good.
In fact, I've had friends of mine in Texas make that point that said that, Davy Crockett brought all his volunteers to Texas to fight for Texas independence. And they said they didn't do as much good. I said, well, it's because they didn't let him bring any more Tennesseans with him. That's the limit. That's all you can bring in.
Right.
And in fact, there used to be an old symbol that would paint on buildings and houses when people would go to Texas. It was GTT. Gone to Texas. And they say
I've been down to the Alamo in San Antonio, and when I did the NBA basketball games out there in 2003, and one of the things that really was neat about it was that they can't have the buildings, the tall buildings in San Antonio, can't cast a shadow
on the Alamo. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, well, I don't know if they're still in effect, but I think it should be. Okay. Hold on, somebody's over here sent me a message. When you go back and look at some of the really great restaurants in Memphis, I mean, John Grazzani's was certainly one of them. And the other thing he did besides introduce wine, was introduce just tasting wine at the front door. Now, think if you could get away with this today. Every person that came in that front door, whether you were 9 years old or 92, he'd give you a little souffle cup of red wine, and you take a sip. Now, could they do that today? I mean, probably not. They'd get him for bootlegging and contributing delinquency of a minor. But tell you what, everybody loved it then, and he was such a great guy. I remember when I had sleepouts, and John Grazzani and Roland Schneider of the old Country Squire restaurant that's out at Forest Hill Irene and Poplar Pike. They both came in, sat down at the end of the bar by the Oyster Bar one day after lunch in the middle of the afternoon, and went, holy crap, it's John Grazzani and Roland Schneider. Everybody, shape up. And they had lunch, ate oysters, had 2 or 3 different entrees, and toward the end of it, walked up and said, hey, guys, is there anything I could do? How's everything? And they said, it's just great. You guys are doing a great job. I mean, I was like walking on air. I said,
did you get a John Grazzani tie for the wall?
We did.
Okay,
had that up, and of course we gave as many of them back as we could, except for the one I've still got that.
You still got Tim McCarver?
I got Tim McCarver's.
You better give it to him.
I had, in fact, a good friend of his sent me a message not long ago. Did you ever get Tim his tie? Because I know him and I could get it to him. She's the art director and procurer at Le Bonheur Children's Hospital, Linda. You know Linda?
Yeah.
And but John was, and then so many restaurants sprung forth from Grazzani's.
Well, just think there was a Grazzani's family, Ronnie and
Frank,
Frank and Dino's over there.
Dino's on
Southwestern Grill when I was in college. It was called Southwestern.
Still
Grill.
is. Well, they may have dropped the South. It's just Dino's Grill down.
Dino's to it and put the Italian in there.
Yeah. In fact, they've got a really, historically speaking, talking about the little room right off the main dining room. It had all this military memorabilia, World War II, yeah.
Yeah, Memphis Belle things like that. It's. I think some of the military people still meet there.
And they do all their handmade ravioli, which all the Grazzani's do everything from scratch. I mean, that was one of the things. And then you got Judd, who's at Ronnie Grazzani's, that's now over at near where Owen Brennan's is.
Okay. One time I filled in for you, and I was filling in for you on a show, and we did it from Sheffield's Antique Mall,
Yeah.
and talked to all the people there, and then Judd came up and talked about the Grisani's, his restaurant in there at that time.
Well,
I got to meet him then.
and I guess it's one of the grandsons, David Grisani, he has it there now. I was there just a few days ago at Sheffield's.
Memphis cannot be open without a Grisani's restaurant somewhere.
And the one thing is, early on doing my favorite restaurant, I did all of them, and except for John, he had closed sadly. But they all have the Miss Mary salad, and they hated that, and because they thought they should be the only ones to have Miss Mary salad. Yeah. And the what was the Alfo Special, which I love. It's one of my favorite things. There is the Alfo Special. Mm-hmm. Let's go back down to Madison Avenue because that's where it really all kind of started. Paulette's, which was there for years, and a great restaurant. I was there next.
He's still on Mud Island, right?
They are. They're out there. Yeah. In fact,
George Falls.
George Falls,
and a great guy he is.
And they also have Tugs, which is right across the little street from there.
I always got on them why they call it Tugs, because it's not tugboats, it's towboats. You can't call it tows because people think of tows, but it's Tugs. It's got a great view. And of course, Paulette's there, you can go up on the roof, like the 5-story stuff above the hotel, and look out.
They've now enclosed that. So you can go up there in the winter, but in the summer, the windows open up so they can get a nice breeze. So that was a very smart move on them.
It's fantastic, yeah.
Then you get, you had Paulette's there. Then right next to it, Bombay Bicycle Club, which is now Bosco's.
Yeah. Remember Bombay?
Yeah, that's pretty much where I hung in my early years here was at Bombay. Then we'd go back and forth across the street to Fridays, which is where I met Ron Olson. He was always spinning records on a Thursday night for TGIF. At midnight, they'd have all the balloons drop down and confetti. Man, just imagine staying up to midnight, Jimmy. Again, I mean, it's...
You know, that was Fridays was open right after they passed liquor by the drink in 71 or so. Ben Woodson, the whole Oakland Square idea. You know, there's still some folks around that worked in those places way back then, and we remember. And what a great thing Oakland Square was, the Dickens Christmas the parade, Christmas parade was down there and everything.
Absolutely.
And of course, back when I was in college, you had Burkle's in there.
That was before I got here. Was that the bakery? Yeah, that was the bakery.
Yeah, right there, kind of where Lafayette's is now. It was then, you know, Lafayette's is a great establishment there now.
Yeah, Kevin Taylor just mentioned Wink Martindale's, which I remember that. Yeah. And then it turned into Mississippi River Company.
Yeah.
Or was it vice versa?
I think it was Mississippi River before.
Okay.
Then it was Pepper Rogers.
Well, no, Bombay Bicycle Club turned into Pepper Rogers.
Okay.
And I used to ask Pepper, I said, Pepper, what's the worst thing here it is? She said, open peppers. Yeah. Cost me a fortune.
You know, we can sit here and joke about restaurants all we want to and all the fun we've had in, but when you've been involved in one, as you well know, it is one of the hardest things to do in life. So many things can go wrong. And I don't mean to negative. I just tip my hat to everybody who runs a successful restaurant. You can lose your power overnight one night and walk in at 6 o'clock in the morning, have everything spoiled in your refrigerator, you know.
So many things. I mean, I had sandwich machines under the bar catch on fire, electrical fire during the service at noon, and I'm going, everybody keep your seat. It's just a fire alarm. And the fire department have their axes and their helmets and their turnout gear on. And but I did find this thing, which is, for everybody is information. It's a fire extinguisher that doesn't spray that white foam on everything and mess everything up. It just sucks all the oxygen out of the air and puts out a fire immediately.
Well, you got to put a mask on it.
No, but you just don't want to, spray it in your own face because it'll suck the oxygen out of you. But it just immediately puts out the fire without having to ruin whatever it is you're doing. And so you can find that at any fire suppression, what was the name of the Benahood company that cleans all the Benahoods? I'll think in a minute. They've been around for Floyd's Fire Extinguisher Company.
Floyd, yes. Floyd's so kind of funny.
And they can
IED or something, yeah.
Hey, as long as they came and cleaned the Benahoods, man.
When I think about restaurants, you think you go to a restaurant for the food, right?
Right.
And the atmosphere, but then there's the servers and the owners too, and the people who meet or don't want to meet there. But you think of some of the great restaurant people we've known, from Big Charlie to Nick
yeah.
Burke there, to Rhonda and John and all them, Tina, and to the Thomas Boggs of the world, and
Well, in fact, I was going to mention.
Steve Busby at Front Street Deli, a simple little one-man deli, and what he did there for 40 years almost,
He was one of my best friends. If I was downtown,
because you had no money, who'd let you get out of there? Early in the morning when you're doing that early morning TV stuff,
I went down, mentioned his name, we got a free biscuit. What can I tell you? But Lee was such a good guy, and I'd go in, and after we left sleep outs, and I'd stop in and say, "How are things going?" He goes, "I don't know how those people stay in business. After you left, there's nobody going in there." But
and I think, and somebody who's still around now, who's been around for a long time, from Jefferson Square to the north end of West, he's Jake Shore.
Yes.
Who this next year will be 80 years old. He goes to work every day.
He is amazing.
277 miles on the menu. And then at Thanksgiving and Christmas with Lindenwood, they did those 1,000 free meals,
Every year.
That little 95-seater restaurant. So it's the spirit of the people that run these restaurants.
Absolutely.
And the family history and the lineage, some of them that continue on. Like even the arcade that went from the Zapatas family to the, Phil Perrell and Carol Perrell there for a while in the 90s, back to the Zapatas now. But you see old little tea shop.
Yep.
Been around for 100
Sue
years.
Sue
Hare, but she wasn't the first one. Vernon Bell was actually down there, I think, once upon a time.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and so Belmont used to be downtown, Jim's Place, places like that move on out east when the people moved out east or further on out. It's just amazing to me.
In fact, Thomas Boggs actually had been working because he was with the Box Tops and the band, and then he went to work for Fridays in New York, and they sent him down to open Memphis, and he got it open, and it was a successful opening, and then they fired him. I said, "What did they fire?"
Well, Huey's Midtown is a great institution.
Well,
now there's 10 or 12 other Hueys all around the community.
I think there are 14 or 15 now, but. He said, I wasn't a real corporate type person. I was too independent. But I tell you what, he took so much of what he learned doing that, which they were good basic operating systems, and employed them at Huey's, and that's what took it to the next level. And the fact that he said, let's make this more family oriented as opposed to the volcano, which is what they used to call it. Because on Friday nights, it was real slow between happy hour and midnight. But at midnight or 1 or 2 in the morning when all the other restaurant people got off work, they descend on Huey's and just exploded. And they called it the volcano. And do you remember Dobler's Dock?
Yeah, in the Cock of the Walk was there. And that's the pier now, or where the pier was.
It was where the pier was.
Down by it, yeah.
In fact, I drove by there 2 days ago. Mm-hmm. And they're turning that into an apartment building. That whole building that was at one time
the butcher shop.
The butcher shop. That's going to be
before the butcher shop. It was called Wolfgang.
I was not. I just remember they left
German
all those.
Brockhaus.
It was a big German, but they left all those moose heads and red stags on the wall.
Yeah, and so butcher shop auctioned those off. They did an eBay auction of all the fixtures and everything, the mirrors. And they had those big paintings, and that wasn't a part of the eBay deal. And I ended up buying all those paintings.
Did
and
you really?
Yeah, they're still over at Mud Island, Mississippi River Museum. We use them as an exhibit in the Change and Exhibit Hall because they're all riverfront scenes.
Oh, they're great.
Huge paintings, so they're there. Just like the Mark Twain Cafeteria was out on Summer Avenue till 1993, and Spiros Angelikis, another either Italian or Greek. It's going to be great food.
Sure.
But my daddy delivered his babies, his wife's babies. And so we were there a lot, and they had those big murals on the wall, the Mark Twain murals and all those scenes. And then when it closed in 93, Susan Elliott, who worked at Mud Island, got the firm crew to move those murals down to Mud Island because they were Mississippi River Mark Twain themed. So they're still preserved too. So preserving some of these things out of these restaurants. You go into the Rendezvous, that's a museum in itself with the atmosphere there and all the history.
Nick told me the story about his dad. And all those guns he bought himself. He was a huge and the gun collections. God knows what they're worth. I mean, because those are original antique muskets and rifles. But everything in there was had a meaning. But Nick said one day his dad, somebody called him and said, "I got a musket. You want to come look at it and see if you want to buy it for the restaurant?" So he walks down the street, buys it, and he's walking back to the Rendezvous with a Civil War musket over his shoulder. Guess what? Nobody said a word. Who's going to say anything to Big Charlie if you had a musket walking down the street?
Well, Big Charlie was as big as they come. When I first got downtown in the early '80s at Mud Island, he called me over one time to to give me support. He was kind of big and gruff, but he was a big teddy bear too. He meant business, and of course Jack Tucker, the architect, the late Jack Tucker, helped preserve. Charlie'd buy the buildings and he'd turn them over to Jack to make sure they got preserved right.
Well,
and Jack did it.
Charlie helped the lady that had Erica's, the German restaurant, right next, kind of upstairs.
Upstairs across, and he also did the Four Flames. The Four Flames? Sure. It became the Child Advocacy Center, but Jack did the redesign of that. Harlan Fields, Four Flames, what a great name. In fact, let me say this, and I'm not trying to promote anybody pushing it, but if you go to historicmemphis.com, historic-memphis.com, and you go down to the upper dashboard, there's a historic Memphis site, and it has all these categories like bridges and buildings and fairgrounds, but the restaurant page is there, and they have significant alphabetized historic-memphis.com, and they have like some of the old menu. It'll mention Anderton's Arcade, I'm just going Beretta's, all that, and it has pictures of those restaurants, menus. Cigarette ashtrays, silverware with their name on them, stuff like that.
Even matches.
It's a great website.
Matches. I mean, everybody used to have matches.
Matchbooks,
Nobody has that anymore. Let's go back down to Madison Avenue and work our way around again. You had the hot air balloon, which is now gastro or local gastro, I think. But I just remember.
Yosemite Sam's.
But was it downstairs or upstairs that Jerry Lee Lewis was playing, and he at the same time then Billy Joel was in Little Rock, got mad at his manager or something, and drove to Memphis and walks in Lafayette's and sits down at the piano. So you had Billy Joel playing at Lafayette's, and across the street you had Jerry Lee playing live at the Hot Air or Yosemite. And I mean, that was before cell phones, texting, anything. Word spread so fast. Both of those places were packed, and people were out on the street going, "Are they really in there? Is this really going on?"
And the Billy Joel concert was broadcast on the radio, and Jake Shore produced that.
Really?
Yeah, and also Barry Manilow and Phoebe Snow. He was telling me some of the names. But he had Lafayette's stereo too over in Summer Center. Wow. He used to service Graceland, Elvis's stereos and stuff. Jake has a great history.
Oh, he does.
Carriages and other things. The South End. Remember the South End?
I remember down in the basement of the King Cotton Hotel was Jefferson Square. And Jake,
it's actually the building next to it where the first Piggly Wiggly was.
You're right.
79 Jefferson Avenue.
But Jefferson Square was down in the basement, and you had hot buttered rum. What's her name?
Joyce Cobb.
Joyce Cobb. Yeah. The great Joyce Cobb would play down there with her band, Hot Buttered Rum, and I was in there one night and you had Wyeth Chandler, the mayor. Why, Chandler? I tell you, boys,
yes, sir, Mr. Dees.
Give me another bourbon over here. And he was at the bar. I came in and sat out at a table, and I remember they had these red checkered tablecloths. And I was sitting there, and I had a couple of drinks, and I got up to go use the restroom, and as I did, I had evidently tucked the tablecloth into my belt as opposed to the napkin. And so I pulled the whole tablecloth off the table, and Wyeth goes, Son, I believe you're taking the table with you now, son. Never forgot that. But
wow.
Wyeth was a great, what a great guy he was. I mean, what a character.
So Jefferson Square burned down on Halloween 1983, the night the press center had us listed as too. And then Jake, a month later, moved up to the North End, Jackson, and then that became Westie's in the early 2000s. Still the same great menu.
The Jefferson Square is where they had a huge party on the night that the movie forever it ran about Korea, the medics in Korea, Alan Ola, MASH. They had this huge MASH party there, and everybody was dressed up like MASH characters, and that was a huge deal. Remember the same thing with Dallas, the last night of Dallas.
Oh gosh, Big D.
And all the restaurants would all participate in all those things. I remember they had Cowboy open right in the middle of Dallas. It was not long after I moved here. And that's what Alon's used to be upstairs, and then they moved downstairs to a larger venue, and they turned what was Alon's into Cowboys because of the huge cowboy influence coming from the show Dallas. But everybody got a cowboy hat. In fact, that's where I met Jerry Lee Lewis.
Well, there you go.
But I think it was when it was still Alon's. I went up there with had a date, and J.W. Witten, who's his road manager, still is.
Yeah.
Waves at me, and I went over, and he introduced us to Jerry Lee, and Jerry Lee said, "Nice to meet you," and he was very nice, and so we went back and sat down. A minute later, the waitress brought us a champagne bucket and a couple of glasses, and said, "This is compliments to Mr. Lewis." And I went, "Well, that is very nice," and I kind of waved at her and said, "Thank you very much." So a minute later, she poured us a couple of glasses. A minute later, she comes over, she goes, "Mr. Lewis says if you're not going to join him, he wants his champagne back." I said, "Okie dokie."
Hey, here's another place over on Park Avenue, Pete and Sam's.
Oh, yeah.
It's been there since like 1948 or something
It's
like that.
still there. In fact, they completely redecorated it, and it looks fabulous. We've been there several times since they've done that, and the food's great. It's such a family. It's like
Bomarito.
Yes, and it's who was it used to play the organ in there, the squeeze box?
You got me on that one.
I'll think of it in a minute because he was just one of the famous Italian families here in Memphis, and but maybe somebody will remind me on Twitter and clue me in.
Make that the calling question, right?
That's a calling question. Who was it? Then you had moving back down to East Memphis. And that was the thing in those days. There really wasn't that much out in East Memphis. Everything was Midtown and downtown.
Yeah, and Poplar Plaza opened in 1949. And I remember the Sears there at Perkins and Poplar built in 57, Goldsmith 60. So that's kind of my bicycle riding days, out in those areas. The Belmont was the half shell, and Windjammer is where the half shell is now. Then Windjammer moved out to Brookhaven Circle.
That's
Brookhaven Circle was where Phil Cannon grew up. That's where the Windjammer was. That was his house. My buddy Phil. That's a residential. When they built Clark Tower, that just big brothered everybody there in the commercial. You see, the residential went on out further.
Yeah. By the way, Ray Pullman just clued us in on the guy that played the school.
Okay.
Tony Barrasso.
Oh yeah. Okay.
How do you forget that?
Way to go, Ray.
Thank you, Ray.
There's somebody older than us with a better mind. That's
He is older than we are. Thank you, Ray, for that too.
Yeah.
But didn't you say the half shell actually started out where Belmont is now at Mendenhall and Poplar, and then the half shell moved across the street to its original location there on the other side of the tracks, and then that became the Belmont, and then
somewhere in there where the Belmont is now, that was called Sir Roberts.
But don't remember.
Sir Roberts is where, my high school years. I didn't go there. I just remember driving by.
And then you had you talked about the Windjammer, and remember John Willingham had a barbecue place at Brookhaven. Well, that was John Wills had that.
Wills, okay.
He was
John Willingham. I think. Gosh, it was Silky and John Willingham who passed away in like the same week about 10 years ago during Memphis May barbecue.
It was. In fact, John Willingham's team said they all got together and said John would want us to go on, so they went ahead.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I remember I was at Fox 13 then, and we did a big story on, of course, John passing. He was a very interesting guy. I mean,
he was a road warrior for barbecue. I tell you that.
He went all over the world doing it, and invented the Wham cooker, the Willingham cooker, and was just an amazing guy. Played the stand-up bass. I didn't know that. And the stand-up, not just the bass, but the stand-up had it at his house. And but he was also working on this thing. I mean, you probably remember because the Memphis Queen, they used to go out and test how long it took for a drum to go from the Hernando de Soto Bridge to the Harahan Bridge to find out how fast the river was flowing, because he was working on a theory to use hydropower to power Memphis and use it for other places up and down the Mississippi River. And he was working with the University of Memphis on that. And then when he passed away, he was the driving force behind that. So, that was kind of the end of that. But, guys.
I tell you, another old place is not necessarily known as a restaurant, but has great food to this day, is Alex's Tavern out on Jackson and Rocky.
Rocky.
That burger is the best in town. I love Huey's. I love everybody else's burger. Don't get me, and barbecue. I love 100 barbecue places like Cozy Corner and Corky's, all them. But his burger, and then he does some wings and some other things, some ribs during football season and stuff, and he caters. I mean, and Alex's Tavern, I think, opened like in 1952 or something.
His dad was Alex. And then when his dad passed away, Rocky came in there, and that we used to go there all the time because it was after hours. You could get a hamburger at 2 o'clock in the morning.
At 4 o'clock in the morning, and the great jukeboxes,
Great jukebox.
And where do restaurant people go after they get off work at 12 and 1 and 2? They got to go somewhere. That's their happy hour.
It was Rocky.
That's one of those places. And the Westie stays open till 3 before COVID.
They had a shuffleboard in there, and
still do.
It now I think caters mostly to Rhodes college students, and then of course everybody shuts down at 10 o'clock now. And, so there is no late night, which would still be late for me because I'm usually around at 8 o'clock is the deal for me. But I guess the whole point of this was just in remembering those great restaurants and the ones that are still operational, that in order to keep them, you got to support them. And even though they're cut back now to 25% capacity, and you got to close at 10 o'clock, and if you keep supporting him, I talked to Mike over at the Blue Monkey this week. I talked to Eric at the barbecue shop, and they said, if we can make it if they just keep supporting us and keep and people are, God bless them, And he says, like, I eat out something every night from a different restaurant, and he says Tsunami. He said I was really surprised at that. He said because a lot of this stuff doesn't hold up well when you get it home, or if you want to reheat it the next day. He said, but that sea bass that they do at Tsunami, he said, it's great when you eat it, when you get it home the first time, and then when you put it in the fridge and open it up and microwave it again the next day, still just as good, which is a huge tribute.
That is. And, regardless of the circumstance, the restaurants are probably cleaner now than ever before, too, because the extra things they have to do.
Oh, absolutely.
And I hate going to a restaurant and only seeing person's half of the face, because of the mask. Or you got to get the little paper packets for salt and pepper and do them because they can't have the condiments out on the table. So it's a real struggle for them to remain clean and right within the law.
Well, they just don't put anything on the tables now. If you want salt and pepper, they bring you the little paper.
I hats off to the delivery people, the services and the pickup and to go and all that.
Sue Luck just sent a message. Said Western Steakhouse on Madison.
Yep, Western Steakhouse.
By the way, Sue, we talked about a little tea shop a minute ago and mentioned your name on that. I don't think you were on then, but.
And I think they recently had a WKNO documentary about Little Tea Shop, didn't they?
They did. Yeah. About just her story is just incredible, and what she's done down there. And then she had the terrible luck of having this underground sewer system or water system for the city, and it like flooded everything. Bar Dog is right next door to her.
Yeah.
All that, and they paid for it once, but then it did it again. They said, we ain't paying this time. And
remember, Bar Dog used to be Mike's. Remember that little
barbecue shop? Yeah, I do remember that. Mike's
good
barbecue.
Breakfast, little small counter.
And Mike's they didn't use their basement. They just used that little shotgun place there. And then when Bar Dog moved in, they went down to the basement and doubled the size of the place, and it just made it huge.
When you first came to town on the mall, you remember Ogleo's? The hot dog place there, right next to what I have to, since Sue Hare called it, I have to mention the peanut shop. That's still there. Peanut shop.
I remember the peanut shop, the little guy with the peanut with the cane tapping on the window. I love that. I just remember when I first got to Memphis in 1978 and drove through downtown.
Everybody was closed.
Boarded up, and there weren't any people. And it was just, there were a few places down there. They had some lunch places, the Yellow Rose. I think you just mentioned that.
Yeah.
And
George and David's. You had a gridiron on the corner where Huey's is, I think,
Remember the
you had a little tea shop, arcade. You had less than 12 restaurants, really.
Yeah. We had the cafeteria that was on the mezzanine level of 100 North Main.
Yeah.
And in fact, they had the best red beans and rice in the city for you. I'd go there every Monday. Jim Elliott and I would when I was at Channel 3, and go and get the red beans and rice there. Blues Alley. Kevin Taylor's mentioned Blues Alley.
Yeah, on Front Street.
The Savron brothers. Were that who had that? Paul
Yeah.
Savron and his brother. I just remember
Joe.
Little Miss something. She was about 4 feet tall, and she was about
Miss Minnie, wasn't it?
Miss Minnie.
Little Laura Dukes. Little Laura Dukes.
That's who it was, Little Laura Dukes. And my parents came in from Texas, and Kathy and I took them to see Miss Laura Dukes. And she would sit on the stage until her part came up. She'd be asleep, sitting in a chair on the stage.
And boing, she'd be wide
and
awake.
then she'd hear the notes leading in. Lou and Paul. Kevin just said Lou and Paul Savron.
Yeah. Lou.
And
hit Lou's place later on down there.
Bill.
Just to the south, yeah.
Yeah.
Lou's a great restaurateur.
There was,
and got to mention the Sabrin family. They were on Beale Street with the Blues Foundation.
Yep.
Joe Sabrin was one of and David Simmons, those guys in the 70s and 80s, when they were, first trying to bring Beale Street back, they were a part of that. I was at the Park Commission at the time and had to be in charge of Handy Park there in the early 80s when they were negotiating all that and moving the WC Handy House over from South Memphis and all that. I think Rum Boogie opened in 85. Beale Street opened in 83. And I don't know if there's anybody original left except James Clark and Il Etc. down there, the clothing store.
I don't think there.
Well, Bernard Chang had a Chinese restaurant where Alfred was,
Yeah, it was called.
He had Tempos.
The China Wall. I think his place was called the China Wall. And then he opened up down at Overton Square in a little place. I'll never forget. Jeff Sanford tells me this great story. He goes to Bernard Chang and says, "Look, I got a great idea for a restaurant." And Bernard goes, "Okay, you tell me." And he says he had the menu, he had the decor, he had everything. And Bernard goes, "Well, let me tell you something, Jeff. It all sounds real good. I only see one problem." And Jeff goes, he's all excited. "What?" He goes, "You don't know a thing about restaurant business."
Well, everybody thinks they do until they got to run one.
Well, they think, how hard could it be? How hard could it be?
It's hard every which way it can be. Yeah. I assure you that. It's no easy deal. I just praise those people that do it day in and day out.
Yep.
7 days a week, golly, and long hours, long days.
You look at Silky and what he did all those years, always sitting outside, the biggest promoter of Memphis. And now you got Jay Bird, who's running things down there, along with
Jay's great.
Flanagan, Dennis Flanagan. Dennis was the mayor of Midtown, and then his brother. Anyway, he's still running Silky's. He's there in the daytime.
Last time I was down there, Lanier Smith, who plays on the patio, and I did some things for Memphis in May 2 years ago. And Clarence was still down there as a doorman. Remember Clarence?
Sure.
Bartender Clarence? he was in all these places.
Mark Flanagan. Mark was the mayor of Midtown. Dennis is at the Silky. Thank you, Kevin. You're a historian too. Remember the story that Silky brought those goats into the courtyard there at Silky's and built a tower and called them the diving goats. And if you sat there and drank beer long enough, you'd see them dive off this tower. It had a circular stairway that went up.
Mm-hmm. It's still there, isn't it?
And I asked him one time, I said, "So what's the deal with the diving goats?" He goes, "They don't dive." He said, "But those Yankees come down here and spend thousands of dollars drinking my beer and whiskey, waiting for those goats to jump." They never do.
Well, the story he told me is the tradition for St. Patrick's Day started way back a long time when the Vikings were coming over to raid Ireland. And their white sails out there would alert the goats on the top of the hills. They come running down, and that'd be an early warning system.
Oh, that was the early warning.
So that's why they raised the goats up in the air. Well, Silky put them on a two-man forklift or scissor lift and raised them up on St. Peter's Day, or St. Patrick's Day, And by the way, Joe Ellen Sullivan and his wife got a brass note on Beale Street in his last year, too. So Silky and Joe Ellen are there together. With brass nuts. I think that's a great story too.
Well, Silky was responsible for the pub crawl that was going when I first moved here.
Down Madison.
In fact, I was living in a little ground floor apartment right across from what is now the barbecue shop.
Okay.
And I woke up and I heard this banging on pans and flutes and just a noise. Like, what is going on? I look out the window, and here's like it was like an army of drunks coming down Madison Avenue headed toward the square. I mean, what the hell is going on? Went outside and stood on my little balcony there. I said, "What's going on?" I said, "It's St. Patrick's Day. Come on!" And they had marched all the way from downtown
To Overton Square.
to Overton Square.
The big pub crawl for quite a few years there. Another silky story too is when I was at Beale Street in the '90s, the goats were chewing on the wall there on the building and causing a flood in there, so we had to put a separate fence up. And then finally, the health department got involved, said you can't have goats on Beale Street. And what Silky told him said, "Look, there's a hotel over on Union Avenue that got ducks in the lobby. You get to that hotel to get rid of those ducks, I'll get rid of my goats."
Guess who still has
Silky
his goats?
1, Health Department 0. There's ducks still in the lobby of the Peabody Hotel, and there's going to be goats on Beale Street forever. Silky just had a different way of seeing things,
He did.
And
He did.
great guy. Great.
Yeah, he went down to New Orleans and opened a Silky's in New Orleans and had it for 2 or 3 years, maybe up until the hurricane. And,
Okay.
And he said, "You know what? My lease was up. I was flooded out. I said it's time to come home." And he came back, and but what an ambassador! He would go over and bring back. Well, he taught people in Ireland how to cook barbecue. He said what they used to do in Ireland, they called it barbecue, was take a piece of meat and throw it on a pile of burning wood, and then flip it once, and take it off, pour a bottle of ketchup on it, and they called it barbecue. And he said,
another good Irishman in downtown is Patrick Riley in
Yes.
Denny,
Yeah.
there at the Majestic Grill in an old movie theater. They used to remember Gordon Bish Brewery and Big River Brewery. That's how it all got started in that old theater there. And Patrick and Denny are doing a great job with Majestic there, I think. Still, I hope. And are great citizens, too, for downtown.
"Oh,
Patrick first came to town when I was at Rock and Soul Museum. He came to work for Gibson there at the Gibson Lounge.
really?"
And that's how he got to Memphis. He was from Hardback Cafe and some other place back in like 2002.
Well,
So he's really stuck here, been a great addition.
yeah,
I don't mind throwing these names around because these guys are always, man, they treat you great. They treat everybody that way.
Well, you do.
know?
That's the whole thing. These are all wonderful hospitality people, because that's what they do. They offer hospitality and great food, and they're continuing to crank it out. It's like you mentioned the Rendezvous. They've got that huge restaurant. They can only let 25% of people down there, but their shipping kitchen has saved them. And years ago, they got
and
that
that's up there in the Pinch.
up there right across from North End.
Westies.
Now it's not called North End anymore, is it? It's called
Westies.
Westies.
346 North Main Street.
And that's where Nick was working before he passed away, which is a huge loss. I miss him every day. I was talking,
1-800-HOGS-FLY or Pigs Fly, whatever.
Pig Fly.
I think they were like somebody. Greg Erickson told me. I think they were like number 4. The first person the FedEx really FedExed them to Ringling Brothers in Sarasota, Florida. Ringling Brothers Band Circus that Greg was working for.
Well, before they ever FedExed anything, they used to give them to pilots that worked for Delta, and they go out and say, "Hey, I'll give you a rack of ribs if you take these rack of ribs." And so
a lot of pilots stay down there at Sheraton and the Crown Plaza and come over to Wesley's late night. Some of the NBA referees still come over there. But so going back to Nick, you mentioned him, Nick and Thomas. What they also did to get involved in the community, and look at Rendezvous at the Zoo.
Yeah.
That event that did so well for the zoo, and just what they put into that in the 80s and 90s to help kickstart the zoo interest back again. So they were always doing charitable work, and with a crisis.
You know where they came from is that Charlie called Thomas, and he told him, he said, "Thomas, he said, then come down to the Rendezvous and see me." He said, "All right, Charlie, I'll be down today." Came down there, and Charlie said, he said, "I want you to get involved in the restaurant community. I want you to go start helping these restaurants, these young struggling people, because that's how I made it. The only way I made it was Abe Plow. He was my landlord, and he said there were some months I couldn't pay. Heck, there were some 6 months I couldn't pay. And I'd go to him and say, "Mr. Abe, I'm afraid I can't get anything to you this month." And he'd go, "Don't you worry about it. We'll take it off the back end." And never asked for anything. And he said, "How can I repay you?" he said, you go out and do the same thing for other people that are struggling. And he said, you'll be paid in full. And so he tells that to Thomas. And Thomas goes, well, I'm just trying to get these things off the ground. I just don't have time for that. So he calls Nick up, and he says, Nick, you got to help me. Your daddy's not speaking to me now. And Nick goes, wait a minute. He said, he's not speaking to you? He said, that's right. He goes, that means he ain't got time to be mad at me, and I ain't saying a word. You're on your own. Evidently, Charlie could only be mad at one person at a time, but he finally had to make up to him and say, okay, I'm helping this. He had to give him a report on what he was doing to make up for it. And Charlie let him off the hook because he said the only way all of us make it is if we all help each other. And if you're doing good, then help the people that are having a tough time. And I guess that's what I'm saying is get out and help. There's a lot of people right now, and they talked about it with the new checks going out to everybody, and should they get them or should they not? Thing is, there's some people that have never lost a day's work or day's pay because they could work for their home, and the relief checks or whatever they call them, that was found money. People went out and bought cars and stuff. But for many people, it's just been extremely tough, and they've run out of all the money that they had and the other resources. So please get out and support them and support somebody 2 or 3 times a week. And when you think of someplace you hadn't been in 20 years, maybe like Coletta's or out of your beaten path, go stop in and say, hey, man, I've been thinking about you. I want to come give you some business. And I promise you they won't forget it. And that includes you, Jimmy. You need to come back to Memphis and support the restaurants here.
Well, if I get there, I'll have my list try to hit every time for 2 or 3 days,
Yeah.
And just to see the people.
Sure.
Again, the food is sometimes secondary, but to see the people working there that can continue to come into work, cook and everything, it's a tough deal for the restaurant industry for sure. And the whole tourism industry took a real hit this past year.
The hotels, I mean, the occupancy rate at the hotels is just nothing right now. And it's just been so tough on everybody. And so we're all praying for this thing to end as soon as possible and if we get back to what it used to be like. And by the way, Jimmy, have you gotten a haircut since you left Memphis?
Well, I hadn't had a haircut in 11 months. And January 28th, I'm going to grow it for 1 year and just see what happens. Somehow, like you, Earle, it doesn't grow here at all. So that's why I have to grow this and make sure people know there's life. There's life in here. It's not right here.
Well, I've always said hair is highly overrated. I mean,
it is.
Even dogs can grow hair. So.
Well, it itches you now when you try to sleep too. I don't know. Well, I think we could talk. Enough. I know. Is this an hour-long deal or what? I don't know.
You got something else you want to say?
No. I was going to try to leave, go eat.
No, that's fine. This is an hour. This is 6 o'clock in your world. But I wanted to thank you, Jimmy, and we'll do it again.
Actually, it's about 10 o'clock in the morning in my world.
I bet it is because you sleep till about 10 o'clock in the morning.
Well, I do, and I started, when you can't get out and circulate as much, I went and got a library card. And I've been doing a whole lot of reading of biographies of people and stuff, not history, but movie stars like James Cagney and Clint Eastwood and Brandon. I'm on Burt Lancaster right now. I'm just having a great time reading biographies of people that when we were growing up, they already established and stars. You don't realize what their lives went through. Their first 50 movies were duds, or that Burt Lancaster was in the circus for 5 years, and all these guys served in the military, and it's just amazing. Natalie Wood, I read her biography, and Nick Adams got her to come to Memphis to meet him. She wanted to meet Elvis, and Elvis wanted to meet her, and Elvis took her down to the Chiska for dinner. Now that started my head ringing. The Chiska was the upscale hotel before the Peabody and the Gayoso and that whole 3 train there. And in the 50s, of course, that's where WHBQ was, where Elvis got on the air with Dewey Phillips. But I actually can't think of the name of the restaurant that was inside the Chiska. Went on the Historic Memphis website. They don't have that name. There's a Chiska coffee shop in a 1955 phone book I got. So I got to find out the name. Maybe Ray Pullman would know that. The restaurant Elvis would have taken Natalie Wood to in 1955 or 56 at the Chiska.
We'll work on that. I bet somebody knows. I know that Big Charlie would have known because he talked about the Chiska when I interviewed.
People that still live in the, they're in their 80s now, probably would have gone
Yeah.
there. I mean, I'm only 68, Earl, so I'm a young pup.
You're young, pup. Yeah. Well, I will tell you somebody that did play there was Desi Arnaz from I Love Lucy.
Okay.
He was a big band leader, and they would come to Memphis, and he'd play at the Chiska for a couple of weeks. But he couldn't eat there because he was he was part of the staff, part of the performers. So he would
Okay.
eat across the street at the Green Beetle.
Green Beetle. Okay.
And he would, they've told me that he would come in and he'd have a couple of beers and a steak and baked potato. And whatever the cost of the meal was, that's how much he would leave in a tip, which was unheard of. I mean, Memphis, they were used to a nickel tip. And this was about $1.50.
That's just your world. That's the way you tip, Earl. Don't make everybody else feel bad about it.
But, and then the other famous person who used to hang out there was
George Bryan.
yeah. The guy that You're Cheating Heart and
Hank Williams.
Hank Williams, Sr. He used to hang out there. In fact, the word is his last binge was at the Green Beetle. Left Memphis, somehow got back to Knoxville, had a gig in
He died in
Kentucky.
Knoxville.
Well, outside Knoxville, he had hired some guy to drive his Cadillac because he was too drunk to drive. And they're in a pouring down rainstorm. The highway patrolman pulls him over, and he goes up to the driver and he said, "What's the hurry?" He said, "Man, I've got to get this guy to someplace in Kentucky, and the weather's bad." And he said, "What guy?" He goes, "This guy in the back seat." So the cop takes his flashlight and shines it back there, and there's Hank Williams laying there in the seat. He goes, "This guy looks dead." And
He was.
He was dead.
He was dead. He
He
died
was
in a hotel in Knoxville down here.
Yeah, so
He is dead.
he is dead. But he loved hanging out at the Green Beetle, and
Bud Tidham bought that later life. Bud's the name we should mention too.
Yes.
Ernestine and Hazels and
Yes.
Russell George down there, and Blue City Cafe, and a lot of things Bud got involved in.
Bud was one of the best operators, restaurant operators I ever met, and he helped so many people. In fact, he went and got the grandson of the guy that used to own the Green Beetle to come run the Green Beetle because they said this is part of your heritage, and that's who's still running it to this day is the grandson of the. And the liquor store that's right next door to the Green Beetle?
Well, it used to be Frank's. It's now a upscale like egg place or something, or egg breakfast thing.
Yeah, but didn't it used to be the Frank Rosani's of the Rosani family?
Well, it's Frank's Liquors. I don't know where the Frank came from. I know that.
Well,
Could be.
they had, because I know the Rosani's that was a family business. It was a liquor store
Okay.
that was next to a restaurant. They used to pass liquor to the restaurant through this, like a speakeasy window. And that was what was at the Green Beetle. They had, if you wanted anything hard liquor, you had to get it from the liquor store. You just go up at this window and order it, and they'd pass it out through the window to you.
When I lived on Pontotoc there in the 90s, I'd walk down the Green Beetle for breakfast, then walk over to the Rock and Soul Museum, and they were already frying the chicken, and the barbecue bologna was about that thick.
Stop.
That people would pick up to take to lunch.
Yes.
Sometimes I'd have barbecue bologna for breakfast. Wow.
Oh, I love
And
barbecue.
it's the best barbecue bologna. That and Cozy Corner have the best thick barbecue bologna
Yeah,
you want to get in Memphis.
yeah. And
I'm just saying.
Ernestine and Hazels, and God, what was the guy's name that ran it for so long?
Russell George.
Russell George, yes.
He's buried at Elmwood Cemetery,
He was a good guy.
right next to Diane Price, and I think Sid Selmish is over there too. That one section.
I know that Russell was telling me the story about Bernard Lansky because I did a video biography on Bernard, who was just incredible. And he said,
And Hal's pretty incredible too now.
Hal is, yeah.
Man.
But
And
he said Bernard was the king of jive talking because he would sit there and go, "Got a new suit on it, got that tag, and leave that Lansky tag on there. It's going to make the girls look if the girls like, and then you're going to be who you want to be. Now get on out there in the street, stand up tall, and walk like a man." He just had this whole rap as it was going, and he was so good at it. He was just an incredible salesperson. Well, there's so many, and I'm sure we left out somebody, but we'll do this again.
So we can call back and do it again. And I think, there's little road trips we could take out to like Shelby Forest General Store or Slingshot Charlie's out on Summer.
Well, now that you've got Sling on your phone, see, you can go to those places, and if there's a nearby Wi-Fi, you can walk along and send it straight back here.
Yeah, well, I'm not down there. I'm not in Shelby County. It's 400 miles away from
But
me.
if you
I
get
live out.
if you can
Is
get
Jerry Snow
Wi-Fi
Cone still
anywhere,
open?
do what?
Is Jerry Snow Cones out there still
Yes, I
open?
drove by there just the other day.
Okay,
They're
well,
there.
good.
They got
Good.
3 trash cans in the parking lot, and just waiting to open again because the schools have kind of been shut down. But when they open the schools
Yeah.
back up, he'll be back, and I'll be there.
You know, Phil lived out in Kyville. They would drive down to Jerry Snow Cones. People would drive from Cordova and Kyville place to Jerry Snow Cones.
Because
I think they might have opened one up on
they,
Germantown Parkway or something too.
they opened at Walnut Grove, Wolf River, and Houston Levee.
All right, I got you.
And it's packed with people all the time. And it's because they make them the old-fashioned way, where they had that heavy syrup, and they really tasted like grape, or really tasted like, strawberry, or whatever it's supposed to be. It wasn't just tinted that color. It actually had the taste to it. So that made the difference. Well, Jimmy, you go. Speaking of taste, go eat dinner, and we'll do this again soon because I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think
I got a list here. I still got a few more that we can do next time, and some other things, and talk about some of these other people and spend some time on them. I know you'd love to talk about the Sunset Cafe.
You and I spent about 2 months building the Sunset Cafe down on the Wolf River, and I remember it was so hot that summer. We had no shade. Had no shade to get under.
Well, of course, you're on the levee. There's not trees growing there on those cobblestone.
I know, but at my age today, I'd have had me a pop-up tent down there. But we didn't ever think of that. I don't think they made pop-up tents back in those days.
No.
But we'll definitely talk about that and sleep outs and Riverside Grill and Captain Bilbo's and some other places.
Armadillo Jacks.
Armadillo Jacks. Carambas.
Number one deal.
Carambas.
Gene Carlisle. That was Beale Street Landing. That name is on that building, Beale Street Landing, before we had the Beale Street Landing there in the river. But that was back in like 78, 79. Yeah. He was ahead of the other Beale Street opening down 2 blocks away. Gene Carlisle did a whole lot. Of course, young Wendy's and all that around the South. Yeah. But, he did a lot for the community, too. And, of course, that's all becoming number one bill. Or the Sons and whatever are doing on, Chase and
it's really amazing. I'm taking some pictures. I'll send them to you and let you see what it looks like.
Yeah, dude, and I'll send you the old pictures of what it used to be like. I had Shop of John Simmons in there, know, and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
They had retail shops down there.
All right. Well, Jimmy Ogle,
all right, pal.
Happy New Year, brother.
Happy New Year to y'all. Thank you, Memphis.
And we'll talk again real soon.
Yes, sir.
All right.
We'll Skype soon.
Skype soon. All right, pal. Jimmy Ogle in Knoxville. Good guy, and we'll miss him. He's been such a big part of Memphis for so many years, and everybody knows him. And he's just like, hey, let's get together again. So I finally got him on Skype. So we got him. Yeah, it was a push, but we pulled it off. That's our show for today. Thank you for tuning in, and we're going to be hopefully visiting with another restaurant tomorrow and continue to support them. So. Get out, call in an order tonight, and go support a local restaurant. We'll see you bright and early at 3 o'clock tomorrow.